Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 427. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. This episode is sponsored by Somatic Experiencing. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic Experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, the Trauma Therapist Podcast listeners can visit traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP. All right, folks, I am very excited to bring on board a new sponsor for the podcast, Gould Farm. Gould Farm is the first residential therapeutic community in the nation dedicated to helping adults with mental health and related challenges move toward recovery, health, and greater independence through community living, meaningful work, and clinical care. In a supportive community environment made up of residents, staff, and their families, Gould Farm helps adults begin to rebuild and regain their lives. Gould Farm offers a full continuum of care with programs in both Boston and Western Massachusetts for those ready for new challenges and structured transition. You can learn more about Gould Farm by going to gouldfarm.org. That's GOULDFARM.org. Hey everyone, Guy here. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that in this episode, Christian goes into some detail into his experiences of being sexually abused. So in listening, use your discretion and take care of yourself. Thank you. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here, and I am very excited and honored to have on Christian Griffith. Christian, welcome in.
Well, thank you.
All right, so let me just, I'm going to read your bio, but before I do, I just want to say that I learned about you several months ago when I found this crazy show called The Selection. It was a History Channel thing, and you were on it, and we'll talk about what it was, but I'll just say that your honesty blew me away in that show. I mean, that was probably the moment where I was like, oh my God, I had so much respect for you. And I was like, I'd love to have this guy on the podcast. And here we are. And so let me just read your bio and then we'll dive in here. So
Okay.
In your bio, you say that my sexual abuse does not define me. It fuels me. I'm not a victim. I'm a fighter. I've completed over 100 races of marathon distance or farther, racing over volcanoes, across deserts, and through tropical jungles and infested swamps all over the world. I've earned my 50-mile bib at World's Toughest Mudder on CBS, took a beating on American Ninja Warrior on NBC, and survived hell as a finisher on The Selection, Special Operations Experiment on the History Channel. I've successfully completed the Fuego y Agua 100,000 trail ultramarathon in Nicaragua more times than anyone else in the history of the race. I'll never be a one-trick pony. In my early years, I missed a lot of potentially great experiences because I thought I was, quote, too cool to do anything but beach sports. Now I want to try everything and do anything healthy and productive that challenges my body, mind, and spirit thoroughly. My motto is live for a living. I strive for it every day. Awesome. Welcome once again. Share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you're calling from right now, and then let's get into it.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I went to high school there, Myrtle Beach High School. I now live in Jacksonville Beach, Florida.
Okay. So if we can, let's kind of talk about the selection for a little bit and then kind of branch out from there. Let me share what my experience was with the selection, and I'll let you fill in the gaps. So the selection was this, 6 or 7, 8 episode series where they got these different special forces guys to basically put a group of civilians through the ringer. And it was an intense process where it was just, they were putting you through these amazing, incredible, experiences that were as close to special operations selection procedures that many people get. And there was one point where they bring in each of you guys and they sit you down at this desk and they kind of talk to you or grill you about why you're there. And when they did that with you, you shared about your abuse history. And for me, in that context, to hear that and to hear you just really openly and honestly disclose that to these guys was kind of shocking, but it was like, holy shit, this guy is open, and honest and courageous too. And it was at that point where it was like, whoa, this there's something about this person who's been through a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Again, and you're pretty much dead on about the selection. It was 16 days. They brought us to the desert of California, and they put us through various episodes or different evolutions associated with various special operations training, whether that's SEER school, escape and evade, whether that's Delta training, whether that's Navy SEAL training. And each person there was an athlete of some sort. And their experiment, the reason they call it special operations experiment, is they were curious to see how many of these quote unquote athletes or tough athletes could get through this kind of training. Right. And yeah, so that was the selection. And you're right. What they did is they brought us into a room. Typically we'd be hooded and they'd walk us around. And it was usually after they had beat us down pretty good, hours and hours of physical training, just no sleep. You'll be a lot more honest when you haven't slept. And then, they also, it was a show. They knew who we were. They knew our backgrounds. They knew through social media what our sort of pain points were, our touch points were, or what we were focused on. And they would grill us on those. And so they knew coming in that I had been a victim of sexual abuse. I didn't know that I was going to admit it on national television. But again, that comes, from being in a very fatigued state, feeling very, more vulnerable than I would otherwise. Didn't have all of my walls up, but it was also at a really interesting time of all this for me because I was coming to the awareness that a lot of my life behaviors and dysfunctions and the ways I dealt with people and the way I dealt with women, all these various things, all stem back to the abuse that I had endured for me as a teenager, 13, 14, 15 years old, at both the hands of strangers and my own mother. So it gets pretty dark. And I knew that this was all kind of bubbling inside of me, and I knew that something was happening, but I don't know how much experience you have with this, and I assume a lot based on your profession. But so then you'll know when I tell you this is that, we don't know what we don't know. So I knew something was happening, but I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't really know how to talk about it. I had been raped by a couple of men. So as another man, it's very difficult to talk about as a man. When we're kids, we always say, I know I did. I say, if any gay guy ever tried something on me, I'd punch him in the mouth, right? Like you have all this bravado at 14. And when it happened to me, I didn't punch anyone in the mouth. I froze like a scared cat. So no one wants to admit that, right? Especially when, you find yourself in peer groups and stuff with people that genuinely have this air of toughness, athletics, things of that nature. So I kind of knew this was bubbling up, but I didn't really know what it meant for my life.
But how old were you when you felt this bubbling up?
Oh gosh, really probably around the age of 35, 36.
So not until then.
It gets more than that. I was aware and kind of curious as to why chose the sexual partners I chose, why I behaved the way I did in relationships, why I sabotaged them, why I sabotaged myself. I was doing really great in my career, and I would do all these various things like cover myself with tattoos or refuse to do timesheets or show up to new business meetings in shorts, thinking that was always going to somehow sabotage me. It ended up creating actually more uniqueness in me that ended up working out for me. So it was just this very bizarre ways that I was doing things, and I'm trying to figure all this out. It was about the time that I got divorced at the age of 44 when I was an extra on a movie, and I met a woman, an actress, while I was doing this movie, and it caused me to get a divorce. And I never wanted to be divorced, man. I never wanted to be a divorced guy. And looking at why I was, unfaithful in my relationship, why I chose this girl I chose, why I wouldn't leave it, that really got me starting to understand or wanting to understand more about why I behave this way. And I started therapy. And I would say really though, honestly, it was the age of 44 when I really started to delve into this. And when you saw me on the show, I was 45 years old. So it took me about a year to actually say it out loud.
So I think on your website, you said 30 years, did you just shove it down, or it was just unconsciously shoved down, this experience?
Yeah. So, it wasn't even, so for me, the one that it sucks to have been raped by a couple of men. Okay. That was horrible. But I'm also somebody that knows that it's not uncommon, happens all the time. I'm certainly not saying it's okay, but I'm saying that it's something that I've heard about, and it just didn't seem crazy weird to me. It seemed like that's something that just happens. There's creeps out there. I fell victim to it. That sucks for me. But the hardest thing for me to ever grasp in my life was being raped by my own mother. And that was something that happened to me when I was 14, happened over a really sick, long period of time. My mom used to hide these books that were about all kinds of various deviant sexual things, like everything from bestiality to group sex to rape to all these various things. And she left them out for me to find during a period of time when I was discovering my own sexuality, 14 years old, going through puberty. Obviously, masturbation is a big part of that. I utilized these books as instruments to fuel my masturbation. So, of course, my first experiences with sexuality was very deviant sexuality. And I carried those into my first couple relationships and sexual experiences, which you can imagine was very shocking for the person on the other end,
Right.
When you're, with 14 years old trying to do anal sex and stuff, that's very shocking to someone. And I didn't know it to be any different. I thought that was normal. I didn't have any other frame of reference for anything else. Besides those books though, my mom was an alcoholic and drug addict. And when she was under the influence of either one, she would create opportunities for me to come in and explore. It would start with me helping her to undress and, obviously go further and further into greater intimacy until, it was inevitable that, sexual activity would happen, all the way to intercourse. And I think even the more shocking part about that is that after that happened, I was 14, and I think there were a couple instances when I was actually 15. I was very ashamed and confused. I certainly didn't talk about it with anyone, but it played out in my life. 14, 15, 16, 17, go to college, right? Same kind of thing. It's like it's always on me. I'm just this crazy oversexed guy, and and it was always on my mind. The thing that I tell people is that, and I think other people who have been through it know this, but when you've been sexually abused like that, and especially in circumstances like this, it just seems like something I just cannot process. My own mom, it's like, it's something that you think about every day when you wake up, something you think about all day long. There's triggers, right? And then it's the last thing you think about at night before you go to bed, every single day of your life. Like even now, it doesn't escape me, right? And it never will. And I get that. That's how I deal with it. That's important. But, back then I didn't know that. And so even when I was 19, it happened again. And I kind of orchestrated it. I was tired of wondering if I was crazy, if I was some kind of sexual deviant, and it was my fault. I did it. And somehow, it was just my deviancy that drove this, and that she played no part in it. It was I broken. And so when I went for it again at 19, and it happened, and it happened anally. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because she tried to pretend like she was asleep. No one sleeps through anal sex. And I knew at that point that she had orchestrated this entire dysfunctional process. And I learned things later on about her that made sense about that. But that's really when, just at that point, I never had the same relationship with her. It wasn't until fast forward right before the selection, actually, I met my fiance, who I'm with now, who's been very supportive with me, and she met my mom for the first time. And she knew instantly something was wrong. As soon as I came there, I'm a very happy guy. I'm a very spunky guy, and I'm very full of energy. Obviously, you see all the things I've done, right? I have a ton of energy. I love life. But when I'm around my mom, I can't even function. Like, I just completely shut down. I look at the floor. I don't look at her. I don't look at anyone. I don't really talk because I just want out of the situation. The anxiety that I feel in just proximity with her brings back these floods of memories, and it's just horrible for me. So when she saw that, she questioned me like crazy on it. She's like, this doesn't make sense. And then once I told her everything, she said, oh my God, we have to get her out of your life. And sort of make a long story short, she was instrumental in that. She told me one day, I went and did my very first talk in a prison. It wasn't even really about sexual abuse. It was just about overcoming. And we were coming back from that. She said, this is your calling. Like, it was amazing to see. It was my first talk ever, and it was to a room full of prisoners, right? Very intimidating. And I went through it pretty well. And she said, this is your calling. This is what you're meant to do. You need to inspire others. And she said, well, we got to get your mom out of your life.
Wow.
And she picked up the phone because I said, I don't know how to do that. My family doesn't know about this, none of that. Like, how do I do that? She goes, oh, it's easy. She picked up the phone. She texted my mom. She said, Christian will no longer be speaking to you directly. He's going through some therapy to deal with some of the things that have happened in his past. And it would be in his best interest to not speak to you. If you have anything to talk to him about related to the family, you can do so through me.
She's no BS, man.
No BS.
Yeah.
So, of course, my mom freaks out, right? She's like, what is this about? And every time that she would try to communicate with me, Lindsay would write right back to her. It's my fiance's Lindsay. She'd write right back to her with just a little bit more detail. She'd say, look, this is about stuff that happened between you two, and you need to leave him alone. She still kept pressing till finally Lindsay said, if you don't leave him alone, we're going to go public about everything that happened. Boom. Crickets at that point. And that's when I started to get help. And
so just a little while ago, you started to get help.
Yeah. I mean, over the last, I'll be 50 this year. So almost 4 years ago, right?
Okay. So 4 years ago. Wow.
Yeah. In the journey, and that's why I ran across the country. I ran across the country to raise money for an organization specifically focused on child abuse and child sexual abuse called Help for Children. And, as I started to get the therapy, I realized there's an army of us out there. Maybe not have been raped by their own parents, but there's an army of us out there that have experienced sexual abuse, and a ton of guys. And we don't talk about this as guys, but it colors our behaviors in the greatest of ways, and especially sexually. And it just became my cause to get guys to start talking about it.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yep.
First off, and when I saw you on the selection and you shared that you had been sexually abused, I was bullied as a young kid, and that just affected and impacted the trajectory of my life. Self-esteem was shot. How I acted in relationships was impacted, and it wasn't by sexual abuse. And I listened to you, I saw you, and was like, dude, this guy can admit that. And I'm having issues admitting that I was merely bullied. So I just wanted to share that it gave me some courage and inspiration. All right, folks, just quickly want to jump in here and thank Somatic Experiencing for sponsoring this podcast. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic Experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE is a complementary modality that focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, please visit www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. You talked about, well, first off, let me ask you this. What was it like to get help, to start? What did you start seeing a therapist? What was that initial process like for you?
That's the thing, is like, it was really scary at first. Telling myself, because number one, I didn't want to admit these things, until, I can talk freely about it now. And quite honestly, it's still hard, but I want to do it because every time it gets easier, number one. And number two, it makes it real when you talk about it, right? There's real value in just being able to have someone to talk to, because it brings everything out. It's no longer being stuffed down, and it almost frees you, And so first I was scared, but what was it? I went through EMDR. You're familiar with EMDR therapy?
Sure. Yeah.
And that was the difference for me over traditional therapy, right? Because I had sworn I was not going to sit in another dark room with some academic with his legs crossed, tell him my story, and then wait 50 minutes for him to ask me what my next appointment could be and if my MasterCard or Visa, right? Like EMDR was very different. And for me as an athlete, I could relate to it because it had a start and a finish. And I know you might want to explain to your listeners what EMDR is later, but ultimately it was a process that I could relate to. And amazingly, I opened up, and I don't know if it was the therapist or what made it so easy, but once I started talking, I wanted to just keep talking. Because what I was learning through the EMDR was that everything was playing together. I looked at it as life Tetris. It's like I had all these holes. I knew this happened and I knew that happened. And did it really happen the way I thought? And my God, that's so sick. Is that possible that happened? But why did it happen? And just all these various questions in my mind. But as I started to go through the therapy, it's like all the blocks started filling in. I because it's your brain, your psyche can only handle so much trauma at a time. I was so overwhelmed with the fact that I had sex with my mother, right, that I couldn't think about all the other ways that she, from a dysfunction perspective, was in my life. The alcoholism and drug addiction. I never really keyed in on that, but that was a horrible aspect of all of this. She's drunk all the time. She had boyfriends carrying her in while I'm learning how to program on the computer. I had friends over, just crazy, embarrassing stuff that I had just blocked out. But once I started talking about it in therapy and really opened up and spent the time and did the work, it was so incredibly helpful for me. It gave me so much strength. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like someone who had knowledge and understanding what happened to them. And then I would look back at all the other people that I knew were victims, and I'd be like, they need this too. This is the key. This is the way out. We always wonder, how do we get out from under all of this dysfunction? This is the way. Therapy is the way. It's the only way.
Had you talked about, traditional talk therapy? Had you had those experiences with therapists who just weren't working for whatever reason? They wanted you to talk about stuff, and
that just wasn't working for me. It was
right.
At the time I wasn't willing, and it was probably right place, right time too, because with those therapists, I wasn't willing to go into it with the same depth I did once I started EMDR.
Yeah.
Because EMDR gave me a safe place, and again, I know it might be confusing for listeners who don't understand EMDR, but because it gave me a safe place to go whenever I felt like I was getting pretty upset, that gave me sort of the ability to jump in and out of it, and I could just keep going with the depth of my trauma until I got it all out.
Yeah, yeah. You talked about life Tetris and so forth. It sounds like once you found this EMDR, it was such a weight off your shoulders. I mean, I can feel from what you're saying, you're like, holy shit, this is what I needed. Would you say that's right? I mean, I guess At what point were you like, and how did you get to the point where I want other people to know about this? I want to get this message out. Talk to us about that process.
Because 35 to 40 years of feeling like you're walking through mud in life, like everything is heavier, everything is harder, you're broken, you're demonized, you shouldn't even be alive, you're some sick freak, all of these various things that prey on your mind, and you think you're all alone, you think you're the only one that's like this, all of these various things, that shit weighs you down, man. It weighs you down, and it affects your self-esteem, and it affects how your relationships and how you can strive in life and how you believe in yourself. And once I got to the point of knowing and understanding that this was not my fault, and like I said, I don't like to use the terminology victim, but this was done to me.
Right.
I didn't have any frame of reference of sexuality until this was done to me. And, once I learned that this wasn't my fault, and that I am okay, and that I am strong, and that I do have the ability to come out from under this, I felt like Superman. It was like a rebirth for me. I was a new man. I was a new man after that EMDR process. And I had a new strength that I felt like would be criminal not to use. I felt lucky. I felt, I not to go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but I almost died in 2012. And one of the things that you learn standing at death's door is how beautiful life is, how much you want to cherish life. And you combine that with the fact of all of a sudden I feel like I've been reborn, like I'm a new man, I'm a strong man. And what do I want to do with this new strength? Well, I want to help other people, because I've learned that helping other people is empowering, and it just continues to make you stronger.
What was your message, or what is your message when you spoke with the inmates at that prison? What did you want them to hear?
Well, for me, when I spoke to the inmates of the prison, it was about overcoming what people will think of you, what you think of yourself, the bad behaviors in your life. What my message really summed up would be: your past doesn't have to be your future. And because that's what I was living at that moment, right? All the things that had happened to me, I was playing out with other people, playing out with other women. And that didn't have to be, right? I didn't have to keep the cycle going, to break the cycle. And that was my message to the prisoners. And, when I spoke to them, I would talk about the various things that had happened to me and the way I'd overcome them, and to give them hope that, hey, some of them been in the prison 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, right? They just keep going through that like a revolving door. And, my message was, hey, this can be the last time you come here.
Right. With regards to the selection process and all of the kind of activities you've been doing, did you see, or do you see that the engagement in that, was that a byproduct of the abuse in some way?
Yeah, two pieces. One is that I've always put myself through tremendous challenges. And while some people might say, wow, that's really cool, you do all these extreme things. I ran through the Alps. I did all kinds of just these crazy, gnarly adventures. And a lot of people would look up to me for that, or think I was some kind, they'd use terms like, dude, such a beast, or whatever. Like, they just use all this terminology, this bravado terminology but in reality, they didn't really have a clue why I was doing it. I enjoy punishing myself. And that's how all this started, was just constantly punishing myself. Anyone who knows me knows that there might be an easy way to do something, but I will purposely choose the harder, more difficult way to do it, because I want to suffer. I believe that I deserve to suffer. And that's a really hard thing to get out of here. But it's a component of me. And so when the selection came up, it was right in my wheelhouse. It was right after I'd done American Ninja Warrior. I'd been living and training in Nicaragua, and I had been doing a lot of events patterned after Special Forces assessment training. And the reason that I did so is because the one mentor and hero of my life was my grandfather. who was Special Forces Air Force at the time. It was Army Air Corps. He was part of General Chennault's Flying Tigers. He was just a flat out badass. And I had so much respect for him, and he was my hero, and we were very, very close. And he actually kept me out of the military because he didn't think I was cut out for it. And he thought I was more of a creative, more of a business guy, that I wouldn't do well in the military because I didn't like to be told what to do. And, he was just very straight up with me. And I had always kind of wondered what I could have been had I been in. And so I was attracted to this kind of stuff. So the idea of just a total beat down and them saying that nobody was going to make it and all of this different stuff, that appealed to me. So I was like, oh, no bullshit, I'm going to make it. Right. And so, yeah, that it was right in my wheelhouse. And
well, it's interesting that you say, your reason for doing this, you had a specific reason for doing these things, but also alongside of that, because you're doing these things, people are saying, oh my God, you are a badass. Oh my, there's a certain social approval and recognition you get for that. They might not know, we might not know originally why you're doing it, but there are those two forces working.
Yeah, and I think I like that. It was kind of like, oh, they don't know really that I have to do this because I hate myself.
Right.
Instead, I get all this love and admiration for being this certain way because, oh, I'm just tough. But you know what? I'm not tough. I just hate myself.
Well, that's a big difference. Like, you would never know that. One would never know that. So, Christian, has your reason for doing these things changed then?
Without a doubt. And it's funny. It's, I still want to do. Well, I mean, right now I have a baby, so I don't have the opportunity to go off.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you, and sprint around the country, sprint around the world, doing all kinds of various challenges. But even when I do, like the run across the country, everything for me from this point on is going to be done for experience, whether that's helping other people, whether that's just experiencing other people, other cultures. It's no longer going to be about the bravado, about the valor that comes with it. It's going to be either for myself or for my daughter, for my family. And I'm all about that now. This is my first blood, and I'm 50 years old, and this is my first daughter. That's my own blood, and it's changed me totally. Like it definitely came at when it needed to, for sure.
There are a lot of therapists of all types listening to this. People who are students who want to become therapists. There are survivors listening to this podcast as well. For those therapists who are working with people who've been impacted by trauma, what do you think it's important for them to know?
Oh, there's a couple of things, and I bring these up a lot because I do a lot of speaking myself. But I think first and foremost is that I believe that therapists and advocates working for children who have been sexually abused, any kind of abuse, but most particularly sexual abuse in particular. While I realize everyone has great intentions, I think there's some huge misconceptions out there about prevention. A lot of times I heard growing up, and I still hear today, people will tell kids, right? They'll say, oh, if someone's touching you, tell someone. Mm-hmm. Or, it's not right. No one's allowed to touch you. No adult's allowed to touch you. Tell someone. Well, guess what? It was my mom. You think I'm going to go to any teacher? You think anyone's going to go to any teacher and tell them that their mom is touching them inappropriately? Like, first of all, they haven't really fully processed that it's inappropriate because they don't really know what that means. Right. And even if it feels wrong and is wrong, you internalize that as it's you, not them. That's your mom. That's an authoritative figure. That's someone that you have grown up your entire life to look at and respect and do what they say. And what they're doing is gospel, right? You don't know any different at that age. Like, you have no frame of reference for deviant sexuality. You have nothing, right? So, I don't know that message resonates with those who are being abused. I think it's really easy for them to say, that's not me,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when it is them.
Right.
And even more so around the male to male thing. I think the male to male thing is gigantic. You know, they're by just telling me you're giving me the permission as a 14-year-old boy to rat on, in my case, my buddy's uncle who came into town and is a big pharmaceutical salesman guy and, you know, was playing with me in a hotel bed. Like, you're going to tell me that I'm going to come to you and tell you that? I'm not going to tell you that. I'm doing everything I can to forget about that because I don't know how to process that. And so I think that message around, do I have an answer of what is the right message? I don't. I wish I did. I'm not trained. But I know that one, it can be challenging. I also think that, quite honestly, that's the biggest message for me, as well as when speaking to someone about their trauma, like, give them the opportunity to talk before you start throwing in antidotes and start throwing in ways that they can deal with it. Like, let people, like, my first few therapists were just trying to give me answers and trying to give me strategies and exercises to deal with things before I had really gotten it all out. And I wasn't ready to deal with it. I still needed to just get it out. You know, and I think that that's a big part. Is that one thing I've loved about this podcast is you let me run, and I'm sure you're going to edit a lot of it because I go on.
I'm not going to edit anything.
but yeah. You know, we have a lot to say. Those of us who have been abused have a lot to say. We have a lot of confusion. We have a lot of examples of trying to sort all this out in our head, and you know, it's not just a real quick 50-minute story.
Right. Wow. Well, what's first of all, let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Christian Griffith. How do people reach out to you? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, a number of ways, but I think if you wanted to check out the website Run to Heal, RUN, the number 2, HEAL.org, runtoheal.org. That talks about the run I did across America from New York to San Francisco. I ran 3,142 miles. I ran 32 to 36 miles a day for 5 months, all in an effort to raise money. I raised $300,000 for prevention and treatment of child abuse. And the whole story's there. And it's obviously you can reach out to me there, Christian at runtoheal.org. And then there's, you know, all those links are on the website, but that's a good way to get in touch with me. And, you know, especially if, let me tell you, man, if you're struggling, if you've got some issues, if you want me to come talk to people, whatever the case may be, I will do just about anything. And, I don't charge for it. You know, I want to be a voice for those. I always say I want to be a voice for the kids, but I also want to be a voice for the men who still have that broken kid inside of them.
Now, what would you say to them? To the men listening to this who've been a victim?
I know what you think. I know what you feel. I know what you're going through. I know the behaviors that you're embarking on because of your abuse. I know what you do when no one's looking. And it sucks. And it's very difficult to deal with. It's very difficult to process in your own life. Certainly, it's not something that you want to talk about and tell people about. But there's only one way to stop doing it. You're not just like starting your own company. There's never the perfect day to do that. There's never the perfect day to walk out of the corporate veil and start your own company. You're never going to wake up one day and say, today's the perfect day. You're never going to wake up one day and all of a sudden these behaviors are going to go away. The only way to deal with it, like an alcoholic, like a drug addict, is to deal with it head on. Get therapy, start talking about it. Just find one person that you trust and tell them your story. Tell them your story and just see where it goes from there. But until you take that first step, you will never get out from under those behaviors. I can promise you that. And they'll get worse and they'll get more deviant and it can work out really poorly for you.
All right. Christian, man, I want to thank you so much for doing this. It was, I mean, I just love what you're doing and how you're doing it. And this is what this podcast is about, man. So
I'm glad. I didn't really know, so I'm glad that I could deliver for you.
All right, man. Take care.
Thank you, brother.
All right, folks, I am very excited to bring on board a new sponsor for the podcast, Gould Farm. Gould Farm is the first residential therapeutic community in the nation dedicated to helping adults with mental health and related challenges move toward recovery, health, and greater independence through community living, meaningful work, and clinical care. In a supportive community environment made up of residents, staff, and their families, Gould Farm helps adults begin to rebuild and regain their lives. Gould Farm offers a full continuum of care with programs in both Boston and Western Massachusetts for those ready for new challenges and structured transition. You can learn more about Gould Farm by going to gouldfarm.org. That's GOULDFARM.org. Once again, thank you to Somatic Experiencing for sponsoring this podcast. Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to resolving trauma worldwide by providing professional training and education in somatic experiencing. It was founded by Dr. Peter Levine, author of the bestseller Waking the Tiger, who developed somatic experiencing based on explorations of how animals deal with threat, nervous system overwhelm, and traumatic experiences on a daily basis. Learn more about somatic experiencing and the SE Professional Training Program at traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP.